Recording. Okay, so I thought to present a three-part series to prepare for the holidays. Usually I do a two-part series, but because of this year with Zoom and the pandemic, there's extra things to talk about. And I thought I would spend today going through the decision to Zoom the holiday services and what exactly the services are going to look like on Zoom. So let me do it this way. The issue there are you know, I had in my head how to do this, and then something else pops in my head. I should talk about that, or I should talk about this. Everyone is on Zoom, obviously, or some other kind of, whether it's Microsoft Teams or WebEx or some other program like that. This is how people are connecting. And this is how we're connecting at Shul. We had a very successful comedy night the other night with over 75 people connecting on Zoom that way. And that's just the way that the world is working today, and organizations are working today, and even schools. Lenore is an administrator at the Charles E. Smith Day School, and today was the first day of school, and except for their pre-K and kindergarten program, everything is virtual. So the amount of work that goes into creating a virtual program as a substitute for in-person is really astounding. Synagogues across the country have been kind of playing catch up since March in how to do services online. These are non-Orthodox synagogues, obviously, and that's an important issue because halachically, according to Jewish law, traditional halacha says that we do not use electricity on Shabbat unless you set the electronic item on a timer. So for example, if you were to walk into an Orthodox Jewish home and the lights were on Shabbat, that's because the lights are on either the lights are on a timer and they will go off by themselves whenever the timer goes off, or they leave the lights on for all of Shabbat. So the idea behind that then extends to anything electronic. So the computer, obviously, an iPhone, a tablet, an iPad, etc. All of these are electronic items that, according to a traditional understanding of Jewish law, would be forbidden to use on Shabbat or holidays. So therefore, that creates a dilemma for traditional Jews. If, since COVID-19 restrictions are that we need to stay at least 6 feet away, but in Montgomery County, in houses of worship, you have to be in a 200 square foot bubble, so that's 14 feet away from each other. It makes in-person services nearly impossible to do logistically. And so for the non-Orthodox in the Jewish community, what could we do to be creative here to keep people together? And so you enter a slippery slope, or you begin a slippery slope when you say that you can use electricity on Shabbat. That's what I do personally. I use electricity on Shabbat to turn on lights in my house, and that's really the only electronic thing I do. I don't use electricity in order to do work. I do use electricity to turn on a light, which I don't see as work. I see as like turning on the faucet to have the water run through, flipping a switch to allow the electricity to run through. But electricity to run a microwave or electricity to run a dishwasher is work in my mind. So again, you see how we begin the slippery slope with this interpretation of how we extend or how we interpret the use of electricity. I personally don't use electricity in order to connect to the internet or to use a computer. That was my policy before March 2020. However, situations can arise in which for an emergency situation or something like that, that you can use, that you can reinterpret Jewish law. So Elizabeth, you ask an important question. Why is the stipulation for houses of worship greater than for restaurants or other places? I have no idea. I can't answer that question. I don't know what the politics were behind that. I really, it's possible. One thing I've heard is that you spend more time in a house of worship than you would in a restaurant. And so therefore, the longer you are, the more dangerous it is to be in contact with the virus. And so that's why you wanted, the health director of Montgomery County suggested a greater distance in a house of worship because you'd be there a longer time. So with this interpretation of Jewish law, allowing one to override Jewish law for an emergency situation, and this is, the Orthodox would agree that this phrase, sha'at hadachak, a crisis, a time of crisis, that one is allowed to do things in that time that are different than normal times. So we, as a congregation, the religious committee and I agreed that we would, well, so we were always live streaming the services on Shabbat, that we would Zoom on Shabbat too. So, you know, so I've said this before months ago when we made the decision to Zoom our Shabbat services. And this is a major compromise on my part personally and for the congregation itself to be this non-traditional. We always prided ourselves to have a traditional approach to our service, so that we tend to be a little bit more traditional in our how we conduct the Shabbat service than the average conservative synagogue in our area. Our kashrut, the kashrut standards of our kitchen, of our shul, are a little bit higher than the average conservative synagogue in the area too. We pride ourselves on that because this way more people can feel comfortable in our building than not. And that's the idea behind it, is to be inclusive. That it might not make sense that the more traditional you are, the more inclusive you are, but that's the idea behind it, that all people in the community can feel comfortable to eat here and to pray here, to be with us in community. So the idea behind Zoom then for Shabbat and holidays is to ensure that we have a community come together like this, that we can, in air quotes, see each other, we can see how we're doing, we can connect to each other in this way, which I think is very important emotionally for all of us to experience. And it's also important for us as a congregation to allow ourselves these opportunities to stay together as a community. So therefore, since we've been Zooming all this time and understanding some of the halachic ramifications behind it, we knew that we were going to have to Zoom the high holiday services. One thing that is clear from those who have done studies of how Zoom meetings work and the effect they have on people who participate, it's clear that you can't really have a meeting last longer than 2 hours. Even that, I can tell you from personal experience from a congregation board meeting, the longer a board meeting lasts, the less likely it is that people are actually paying attention. Right, what Howard adds there about being in a synagogue, about, yes, you'd be singing a lot. In a restaurant, you wouldn't be singing. And so that projects the virus further too. And there's a question about blowing the shofar as well. So, So the idea is that 2 hours is around the time limit that you want to have a Zoom meeting last. And on a regular Shabbat morning, that's about, if you include the Kiddush time, then our Shabbat morning service lasts about 2 hours. Usually the service is over about 11:15, 11:20. And then we have 10 minutes or so for Kiddush when we're schmoozing with each other. When it was Shavuot and Passover, maybe we were pushing the 2-hour time frame, especially when it was Yizkor. But that's about the idea that I had in mind as a time frame to keep people paying attention and not to be distracted and to be focused on the service itself. As we know, the high holiday morning services are much longer than 2 hours. That is, a conservative synagogue high holiday morning service is much longer than 2 hours. So Rosh Hashanah morning services, we begin at 8:30, usually not done until about 1:30, right? So give or take about 5 hours. There's no way we can do a 5-hour service on Zoom. So what are the options? So I know that a lot of synagogues have decided to record the entire service and have the recording of the service available for people over the high holidays. The advantage of recording the service is that you have the whole service there. You could send out, you can divide up the recording into the different parts. So you can have a preliminary service recording. You can have a Shacharit, the morning service recording. You can have the Torah reading and Haftorah section. You can have Musaf, all in different recordings. And you have the entire service being done that way. And the other advantage of doing it as a recording is that you can be as professional as you want. There are companies that synagogues hire to do high quality production, multi-camera, multi-effect, kind of looks like a Hollywood production of a service. And you can imagine the cost of creating such a recording and such a production, that it's thousands and thousands of dollars. So, but the benefit is you have a quality recording of a service or the services, and people can watch the service at their leisure. I and the religious committee were not interested in that. We wanted something live, or so-called live, not a recording. So it's impossible to do the entire service within 2 hours and have a meaningful Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur service in 2 hours. So the way I decided to do it is as follows. And also, we also knew that the shul, it didn't make sense for the shul to invest thousands and thousands of dollars in a professional quality recording or performance of the service. It just, I don't think all of you require that. I don't think that you would be going necessarily, if you had the choice between our amateur service that we do on a Shabbat morning versus Park Avenue Synagogue, for example, that has this professional Hollywood value. I think that really the bottom line is, if you know people, then you have a connection, and that would be your in to the service. Or if you don't know anybody at all, then maybe you'd be drawn to something that looks a little bit more professional. But all of us are drawn to each other, and we have a connection to each other. And I really don't think that the higher quality that thousands of dollars would provide would really make a difference in the end. So that was pretty clear to our religious committee that going the recording route was not an option. And so what we decided to do is that for the morning service of Rosh Hashanah, for example, we would start the service after the Haftorah. so that on Shabbat morning, for example, the first day of Rosh Hashanah, we would start the service with Cantor Adina singing a prayer. Perhaps she would sing a prayer from the morning service as kind of a lead-in to the service itself. We would do the prayers for country, Israel, and peace. And then on Shabbat, I would present my sermon. And then Cantor Adina will then start with Hineni, Chatzi Kaddish, and singing the Musaf Amida out loud. On Sunday, the second day of Rosh Hashanah, be the exact same, except that before my sermon, we'll have the shofar service. And we'll be adding the shofar to the Musaf Amida as well. This way, we have an entire service that we do the normal way that we do it. For the highest attendance that we have also on Rosh Hashanah morning, people usually arrive. Service starts at 8:30. Most people are in the building by 10:30, quarter to 11. That's really when, and then from a quarter to 11 until about 1 or so is how long the service lasts on Rosh Hashanah, and that's exactly what we're going to be doing with our Zoom service on Rosh Hashanah morning. And so that way we get an entire service in. We have the sermon, which the religious committee said that we should have. And we have the shofar as we usually have it. But we don't have the preliminary service and we don't have the shacharit service. So that people will have to do on their own. And so I will encourage people to do that so that before the service starts at 9:30, so like at 9 o'clock on your own, take out the machzor and go through the preliminary service and the shacharit service. Torah and Haftarah, there's just no time to do that within the 2-hour time frame that we have. And in order to have the whole Musaf service there, because to read Torah and do a Haftarah would take together about 45 minutes, and that already is nearly half the time allotted for the Zoom time. And we felt that we did not need to do that. I usually refer to the Torah reading or the Haftarah in my remarks, in my sermon. And the Torah and the Haftarah, yes, it is a mitzvah to hear the Torah being read on Shabbat and holidays. It's just that it's one mitzvah that we won't be able to do that way. Torah study is a mitzvah, and Torah study you can do on your own, and you can read the Torah reading and the Haftarah on your own. So that's how I and our congregation have decided to deal with the restrictions that COVID is forcing upon us. Now, Wendy could tell us something different about what her son, Rabbi Stephen, is doing at his synagogue in Omaha, Nebraska. And we could hear from other rabbis and what B'nai Israel in Rockville is having people come in person and having an in-person service. So congregations are doing, and Orthodox synagogues where they tend to have more people who are knowledgeable and have a Jewish background and know how to conduct services. In many Orthodox communities, people are having services in their backyard in a socially distant way for smaller minyanim. So for example, I'm sure Kent Mills Synagogue is doing that people in their little neighborhoods or their cul-de-sacs are having services that way. So we're not set up that way as a community. We have a couple of people who know how to lead a service, but certainly not enough to accommodate our community in that way. What we will do to try to bring people together is, you saw in your high holiday packet, there's one page there that says, come to the synagogue, to groups that will be limited of 25 people at the most. Come to the synagogue on days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So that is Monday, September 21st to that Friday. And then also Sunday, which is Kol Nidre, Sunday, September 27th, there are a total of 18 time slots, each an hour long, to come to the synagogue in that small group to the sanctuary to offer a prayer or two in front of the ark on your own, and then go outside to the garden in a socially distant way to hear the shofar being blown, because that's another issue. The mitzvah of hearing the shofar is really hearing it in person, not over Zoom or the internet or a recording. You really need to fulfill the mitzvah of hearing the shofar, you really need to hear it in person. So this is our way of being able to fulfill, to help people fulfill the mitzvah of hearing the shofar, that we're doing it in these times, offering these time slots for people to come to shul to hear it. And then also they have the opportunity to go across the street to the pond behind the Olney Swim Center to do Tashlich, which is traditional, of course, any time between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So this is also what we're doing. I know there are a lot of synagogues on Sunday, the second day of Rosh Hashanah, that are having people drive into the parking lot and do shofar that way. Or this month of Elul, when the shofar traditionally is blown, but without a blessing at the end of the morning service, that they're doing, that some congregations across the country are doing like these drive-by shofar blowings, or where shofar blowers go to different neighborhoods and people can come to neighborhoods that way to hear the shofar being blown. Again, this is what we came up with as a congregation to do, and hopefully people are taking advantage of those time slots to try to sign up and come to shul for that. So our morning services then, that's how we're working. And on Yom Kippur morning, it'll be the same way. It'll be prayer for country, Israel, peace, my sermon, and then Yizkor. So Yizkor will be nearly at the beginning of the service, like within the first half hour, Yizkor, and then Hineni, and then the Musaf service, including an abbreviated avoda, and that's the reminder of what took place in the temple in Jerusalem on Yom Kippur, and also martyrology. So all of that will be in about 2 hours. We'll have a study session later in the afternoon on Yom Kippur, and then all of our evening services are always less than 2 hours. So the first evening of Rosh Hashanah, second evening of Rosh Hashanah, that we're going to do as usual, but do it on Zoom. There's nothing that we need to skip. We can do the entire service as we usually do. And the first evening service is 45 minutes long. So that is not an issue. Kol Nidre, though, might have to be cut back a little bit, but otherwise, obviously, we don't take the Torahs. We're not going to be taking the Torahs out of the ark. But so we'll cut down. But Perry, as the new president, he'll have remarks to share. The Kol Nidre campaign chair will have a few remarks to share as well. And the Kol Nidre service itself will just have to be cut back just slightly in order to try to get it. It's usually 2.5 hours long, so it'll be a little bit less. And then the concluding service of Yom Kippur, Mincha and Ne'ilah, that also will be already a half hour will be not done, because we're not going to be reading Torah and we're not going to be doing the book of Jonah as the Haftorah. So that already saves time, and we'll be able to do everything in the 2 hours allotted. So let me stop here for a few moments. Any thoughts or comments or questions about this? Do you think that we made the wrong decision? Do you have suggestions? Any questions about this and about how we're doing the holidays this year? Wendy.
I just would compliment the religious committee and you and Cantor Adina for all the work that's gone into this, the thought. It's unprecedented. We've never had to do it before. The fact that, you have to now use Zoom and electronics on Shabbat and Yom Tov is unprecedented. It's not something that you want to do. I know it's not something that Stephen wants to do. Right. And probably most of the conservative rabbis that lean in that direction. So you know, we're looking forward to it. We'll probably have two different
Yeah,
things going on at the same time. We'll start with you guys, and then we'll have
right.
Stevens as well. Um,
Yeah, he's an
but
hour back. So what time is he doing his
he's
service?
an hour behind. I don't have his time frame yet.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I'm sure we've gotten it in the mail. I just haven't looked
Right,
at it.
right.
But you know, I just want to thank you guys for all you've done, because I know it hasn't been easy, but I think you've really helped keep the community together. And, you know, hopefully
Well,
we'll all see each other kind of distant, maybe at the water at some point, and
right,
blowing shofar at some point. And,
right.
you know, I think it's been good. It's
Well,
not easy.
yeah, so I appreciate that, Wendy, a lot. And it's just, as you say, it's unprecedented. And, you know, so we were a step ahead of many synagogues right when the virus started, because we had the technology already for live stream. So we were
Right.
already able to do that. The question then was whether I was willing to take the next step and go to Zoom. And you know, so when we looked at the Teshuvah, the halachic opinion that was actually written by Rabbi Josh Heller from the law committee, he's a congregational rabbi in a suburbs of Atlanta. It's really incredible the amount of detail there for the options. Like I said, this slippery slope. So how, you know, so if you want to do this much, here's how you can do it. If you want to do this much, here's how you can do it. If you want to do this much, here's how you can do it. So, and all of them with some halachic kind of basis. So there was just something that came out from the Rabbinical Assembly today. So I'm just going to put you on mute, Wendy. Something came out from you're muted already. Something from the Rabbinical Assembly today that, you know, so if you turn on the computer, okay, but perhaps it's better not to turn the computer on at all and just leave it running. Kind of like setting your lights on a timer. So if you could, or like my coffee maker, that I'll set up before Shabbat, and it'll turn on Shabbat morning and makes coffee for me. I didn't turn it on, but I set it before Shabbat to do that. So you can do that. That's halachically acceptable to do. So yeah, so I don't make coffee on Shabbat. The coffee maker is making coffee on Shabbat, even though I had in mind on Friday afternoon that I want coffee on Shabbat morning. Even though I'm thinking that as I'm putting the coffee in and the water in and pressing the program switch or the timer switch, it's still halachically acceptable to do that, because it's as if I'm making it work on Friday, but it's okay. You see that even the loopholes that the rabbis allow, and this in the Orthodox world too, they would set it. They set their coffee makers on Friday to turn on Shabbat. That even the loophole itself sounds kind of iffy. So what Rabbi Josh Heller has arranged with the Zoom Corporation is to allow a meeting on Zoom times out at 24 hours. So you can if you set a meeting time, like let's say this high holiday seminar today, that's what I titled it myself. I could have it go as long as 24 hours. That's as long as this meeting could go. And then it shuts off. And there's nothing you can do to override that. Unlike an electric oven has a Shabbat feature. All ovens in America are made today, the manufacturer. You look in your manual, if you have an electric oven, you look, or even if you have a gas oven, you look in your instruction manual and you can see how you can override the automatic turn off feature of your oven. And you can allow your oven to stay on for as long as you want. So we do that with our electric oven so that it doesn't turn off automatically. So Zoom now has a feature, thanks to Rabbi Josh Heller, that will allow a meeting to stay on for 72 hours. So what that means is, this is important this year because Shabbat leads into the holiday. 3 of the 4 weeks of holidays are Saturday, Sunday holidays, right? Rosh Hashanah is Friday night, Saturday, Sunday. Yom Kippur is Sunday night, Monday. But then Sukkot, Friday night, Saturday, Sunday. Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah, Friday night, Saturday, Sunday. So theoretically then, from Friday evening until the holiday is over, Sunday night, you're not allowed to use electricity. So if that's the case, for those who don't want to use Zoom on Shabbat, here's an opportunity that you can use Zoom on Shabbat. And even though I use Zoom on Shabbat, I'm considering doing this as an option so that I'll turn on my Zoom and then I'll have to figure out how to keep my computer on and not going to sleep. But that's another thing. But you can do that. So I turn on my computer and turn on the Zoom session Friday, September 18th, and enough time for the 6 o'clock service. Service is over, but I won't turn it off. People will go away, or for other people who care about it, they can stay on. And then 9:30, Shabbat morning, Rosh Hashanah morning, it's still there. I can just continue. People can log on, but I can continue without having to do anything. Saturday night, 6 o'clock, see that? So it stays on. So it's something I signed up. All rabbis have to sign a Google Doc to say that you're interested in doing this. And then Zoom will send you the parameters for how to upgrade or update your own personal Zoom account to give you that option. So this is just something, for most people out there, this is, going too far, and it's too much minutia, and really, what's the point? But for me, the idea is, this is what halacha is all about, what Jewish law is all about. The understanding that when you believe in God, that you also believe, this is what Judaism believes, you believe in God and you believe that God wants you to act a particular way, and that the way you act should reflect God in your life. Okay, so therefore, how we observe Shabbat isn't just about spending some time to connect to God who created the universe and created the Sabbath day, but it's also about how we conduct ourselves on Shabbat to reflect that it is a day of rest. And that's subjective, obviously, but the rabbis provided many, many parameters for how to make Shabbat as much a day of rest as possible. And so, though it seems like splitting hairs with how we can do Zoom and how we can leave the computer on, and now we have the option to keep it on for 72 hours, that might be splitting hairs. And often I think that myself personally, that I'm splitting hairs, but it's a way of saying, okay, God, I want to show that I believe in you. And I want to show that I believe in observing Shabbat in this way. However, COVID has impacted my life, and I want to be with community, but I want to be with community in as Shabbos-dik, that the kind of the Yiddishized way of saying this, as Shabbos-dik a way as possible. So this is a way that enables us to do that. So yeah. Any other thoughts? Yes, Rita.
I have a question pertaining to the Torah. Maybe I misunderstood you. There will be no Torah readings on Rosh Hashanah?
Correct. And Yom Kippur. No Torah reading and no Haftorah. That's correct. That's correct. No Torah, no Haftorah. Both days, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur morning and Yom Kippur afternoon. So we will not be hearing the Torah being read, and we will not hear the Haftorah be read either. Again, it's a timing issue, Rita, purely a timing issue. And also the issue is how much impact that the parts of the service have for us. So in other words, is it more meaningful for people to hear the Torah read in its unusual way, the special high holiday way? Or is it more impactful for people to be singing B'Rosh Hashanah Yikatevun, U'V'Yom Tzom Kippur Yechatemun, right? So what has the most spiritual impact on people? I would argue the whole service has a spiritual impact, but if you have to make a choice, I'm going to lean, and I did lean towards Musaf over Torah and the Haftarah. The Torah readings are important, obviously, and with the special trup for the high holidays, obviously it's impactful to me and meaningful to many people. And we have many people in the congregation who read Torah for us on the high holidays, and people in the congregation who look forward to doing their Haftarah, like Stan Kensky and Josh Lansky, and you sometimes have done the book of Jonah on Yom Kippur afternoon. And so, right, so we remember people who did that. I remember a long time ago, Arthur Bressler, may rest in peace, and Joe Potash, may rest in peace, doing the Haftarahs on Rosh Hashanah morning, right? So these things still stick with me as impactful experiences, but we have to, we had no choice but to pick and choose. And we felt that Musaf would be the most impactful experience that most people have, and prefer to hear Cantor Adina's voice over the time that it would take to read from the Torah and the Haftarah.
I'm also sad that we're not going to have the choir, but of course.
No,
that would-
absolutely. So now that's another thing, Rita. That gets to the production value and how much money we would have had to spend in order to have a choir. Because just on Shabbat morning, when you all are listening, when Cantor Adina and I are unmuted, she's leading the service and I'm kind of singing along. To me, it sounds like I'm singing along, but to her, it sounds like I'm late. And I think to all of you, it sounds like
You
I'm
are
late.
too.
Right. So that you can overcome that if you record it ahead of time. Right. So there are these YouTube videos. Do you remember back in March or April and May when John Krasinski did that some good news or something? He did like this 20-minute kind of show, some good news. And the first episode, he had the cast of Hamilton sing like kind of highlights of Hamilton. So, and it had like the screen that you're looking at now, all the characters singing, but they did that by recording and then editing, a huge amount of editing to make it sound like they're all singing at the same time, right? So it's impossible for you and your fellow choir members to be singing with Adina live on Zoom, because it would just sound discordant, because you'd be singing and then Susan would be singing. She thinks she's singing with you, but she's really singing like a note or two behind. And then that affects how Julian and Stan and Milt are singing a few notes behind. And right, so you see, and for people listening, it would be awful. It would be awful. So we just cannot do that. We could not. There's a way around it, but it would cost thousands and thousands of dollars to avoid that, and it just did not make sense for us to spend
Maybe a Cash App next year.
Exactly right. So yes. So hopefully this is an anomaly. It's a once in a millennium experience, hopefully, and that next year will be so-called back to normal with being in community. But that's
thanks for providing the Zoom for us.
No,
At
absolutely.
least we'll have a service.
Absolutely. So it's second best, and we know that the Zoom experience this year is going to be second best, but we're going to make it as best as it can be, as second best,
Right.
with all these things that we had to think about to make it to make it as spiritual as possible. So now the junior, just a second, Elizabeth, the junior congregation though decided that they will do, they signed up for a recording from Rick Recht, Rabbi Josh Warsofsky, and this woman Shira Klein. The three of them together are producing this family service. So there's a family service and there's also a kids service, two separate things that they're doing, that they're sending out. We had to pay for this, but we felt that it was worth the investment to do this. in this recording, this top quality thing, which is about 45 minutes to an hour, that our families and children can sign up for this top quality production, which allowed for Babette and me to add our own little recordings to them to kind of personalize it for our congregation. So that's how we're doing junior congregation this year too. So it is these decisions, all the logistics and everything that we had to consider. This is how we felt that we were comfortable with for Sha'arei Tefillah. And again, if you were to go to B'nai Shalom of Olney and Tikvat Israel, you would see, and other congregations in the area, you would see that they would be slightly different. Like our own Jonathan Cohen, the executive director, has worked for the past few years as a high holiday cantor for a synagogue in Westchester County in New York. And so this year he is recording the entire service from our Bima, and he's going to be reading Torah also from our Torah. And then that synagogue, he told me, that synagogue has paid a production company $8,000 to edit those recordings and put together a 2-hour Rosh Hashanah service. So and that congregation in Westchester County, Jonathan says, is the size of our congregation. So can you imagine spending $8,000 for, right? It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't seem, money is tight everywhere. And you can, if we had a choice of, if we had $8,000 just sitting somewhere, I would never advocate using the $8,000 on a recording, right? Use it for something else in the synagogue that will have more lasting value than just once on Rosh Hashanah, right? Invest in something else for the shul. But this is what synagogues are doing. $8,000 to have, to produce a recording for the high holidays. So Elizabeth, what did you want to say or ask? Go ahead, unmute yourself. Yep.
Well, not much. I just wanted to say thank you to you and the religious committee, because I really feel that these decisions were not made lightly. Obviously, it's sad. It's difficult for everybody. But you asked earlier, you said, did we make the right decision? Well, I have to believe that you made the right decision for this community, because Hashem is allowing it. This is what we're doing, and I think that God is in it, and we have the capacity to think for ourselves. I'm going to get the most out of this that I possibly can, and I am not going to complain or grumble or feel like it's not the best thing that I could possibly have. I mean, that's what we have to do. This is a very exciting time for me. This is my first Rosh Hashanah,
Right.
and my first
Jew. That's right.
Not feeling like, well, I'm here, but I'm just a patriarchal Jew, and now I'm not just a patriarchal Jew. So, that's very exciting for me.
Yeah.
This is how I'm going to spend it. So I'm just going to say thank you.
Right.
You all worked very hard to put this together for all of us.
So Elizabeth, I appreciate that very much. And there's one thing about what you said about that certainly in my mind, I'm trying to do the best I can to, in my recognition that God is really at the basis for everything that we do. And that I feel very strongly that that these decisions are not made lightly. So they're not made lightly in terms of how they'll be appreciated by the congregation, and they're not be made lightly because I understand that services, these are the most well-attended services of all synagogues around the world, right? So that normally we would have 500 people or so in shul on these holidays. So that we have then we have to understand that what we're doing on a high holidays is going to impact a lot of people, and we want to do the best we can to be as spiritual as possible for as many people as possible. And so that I have no idea if we made the right decision, no idea at all. And I keep reading about what other synagogues are doing, and so I say maybe we should have done that. Should we have done that? And no, I'm comfortable in the decisions that we reached, and I feel good about how we are going to be doing these services. Whether they will have the same impact as holiday services have in the past, I really don't know. I just do know that they will be different. They will feel incredibly different to me, but I'm going to do my best to make it feel as uplifting as possible. The other thing I wanted to say about what you said, Elizabeth, is that also the decisions that we make, and I see, Danny, that your hand is up, so I'll get to you in a moment. The impact, the long-lasting effect of this decision for after COVID is over and we come back in person. So that's the idea. So the rabbis back in the time of the Talmud, one idea behind how they were hesitant about making any kind of change is that they recognize that once you change something, it's nearly impossible to go back to the way it was before. Once you change it, then the new becomes the basis for then moving forward. So what I mean by that is, so now that we've come accustomed to Zooming a minyan for evening and morning services, what we need to keep in mind is that the ideal is to have a minyan in person, physically in person. But so we will go back to having minyan in the building. We absolutely will. But what happens when we have 8 people on a Monday morning? How are we going to make a minyan? Are we going to call people like I used to do and ask them to come to synagogue? Or are we going to Zoom in those 2 other people that we need to make a minyan? Now, before this time, everybody I'd say 90% of the conservative movement said before virus, 90% of rabbis in the conservative movement said you cannot Zoom in to make a minyan. You can Zoom in to be number 11, but you cannot Zoom in to be one of the 10 to make a minyan. Okay, so everybody agreed you can Zoom beyond the 10 that are already in the room. You can join by Zoom and you can say Kaddish by Zoom to a minyan that is present in the building. But if you don't have a minyan, you only have 8. Can you have 2 more, 1 more join to make that a minyan that way? Before virus, 90% said no. Now post-virus, what are we going to do? So that's something that the religious committee and I will have to discuss about that, right? People are on the please you can count on me list to drive over and make a minyan. Well, maybe those people would say or we could have a longer list of people who say, sure, I'll Zoom in to make a minyan, right? Just to point out, Saul and Howard, who live across the street from each other, 20 minutes away from the shul, perhaps they'd be willing to Zoom in to make a minyan rather than get in their car, drive 20 minutes for a 10-minute service. I could see how it would make sense and more convenient to Zoom in to make a minyan than to drive to the building. So this is the challenge when you make a change like we did for Zoom, even if it's a time of crisis and this time of crisis is lasting several months, it's going to be very hard to go back to the way we were doing it before. So Danny, we'll have this be the last question.
Yeah, so Joan, I was just going to say to everyone, my dad passed away back in October, and
Right.
I was doing the best I could to say Kaddish, but with the pandemic and the sports shutting down and not being able to go, I've been able to say more Kaddishes for my
Right.
dad than by Zoom, and than I
Right.
have been able to, that I would have ever thought.
That's right.
And then, I think being able to see everybody has been the best Jewish recipe for this pandemic, being able to see faces and being able to talk to people. If we can't see them in person, at least we have this.
Right.
And then you got people that are the holiday Jews that come to services just during the holidays. And those people are probably going to be disappointed that they can't come see their friends at the holiday time.
That's possible, but at least these people will recognize, at least non-Orthodox people will recognize that, as far as I know, aside from B'nai Israel and maybe Har Shalom, nobody else is doing in-person services. So, it's not like we have competition out there, like we're the only ones doing Zoom-only services. It's 90% of the synagogues in the country that are not Orthodox are doing Zoom services. So, it's just the way it is. And I think most people see that and understand that. So, yeah, and I hear you, Danny, and I understand that, the Zoom has been in some ways a godsend to save. Imagine, if we were living through the Spanish flu 100 years ago with no technology back then, what do people have? Like some people had telephones, some, right? Most people are driving a horse and buggy 100 years ago, and there's no antibiotics, nothing. So, right. So it's crazy time, and there's no way that people were staying. Synagogues were closed altogether 100 years ago. So this way, at least, our community can stay open to some degree, and like you said, we can see each other. So that's the idea behind this, and so hopefully it will be meaningful, and that we can still have an uplifting, powerful Jewish experience over the high holidays. So what I want to do the next 2 weeks during this time slot is to talk about the Rosh Hashanah prayers next week, and kind of like in a new light how we can understand a couple of these themes of Rosh Hashanah in light of the pandemic. So that'll be the topic for next week. And then the following week, same thing with Yom Kippur, how we can understand some of those themes in light of what we're dealing with today, racial justice and pandemic, etc. So thank you all for being here today, and hope everybody has a good rest of the day. Please stay safe and healthy. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You bet.
Thank you, guys. Everybody
Thank
stay
you, bye.
Good to see everybody. Take care.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Joe.